Listen to any atheist talk about how we got here. It's not long before they talk about man's transition from animals.
We have a common ancestor with monkeys, which lived about 20 million years ago, and we've both been evolving ever since. That's as simple as that.
They will call themselves animals still. In fairness, Christians say it too. I was thinking about this recently. Jesus, in contrast, didn't speak about us in this way. In fact, he highlighted the huge gap between mankind and animals. And this makes sense when you read through the Bible and see how man is the crowning jewel of creation, even more significant in God's eyes than the world. I want to highlight 3 examples of Jesus speaking about animals in contrast to humans. I want to start with Mark chapter 5. This is one of my favorite stories of Jesus in the Bible. Jesus crosses over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and a demon-possessed man comes to meet him. Verse 3 says, he lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him. These demons gave this man the power to avoid arrest. Verse 4 says, he had been bound often in chains, and he pulled them apart and broke them. Imagine dealing with someone like this. Verse 5 says, and always night and day he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. It's so easy to downplay this today, but think about where he was. He was away from society. He's isolated, and because no one could bind him, he would get left to die. This is the kind of person people would view as of no value, a gone case. Verse 7 to 8 speaks about the man running and worshipping Jesus. The demons knew who he was. The demons begged Jesus not to torment them. Jesus cares about the man. This is someone he created. In verse 8 we see Jesus cast out the devil. In verse 9 Jesus asks, what is your name? The demons reply by saying, they are legion, for they are many. A legion was a group of thousands of Roman soldiers. There's an army of demons controlling this man. This is how he was able to break handcuffs and chains. The demons don't want to be cast out, but beg Jesus to allow them to enter the pigs nearby. Verse 13 tells us what happens. It says, and forthwith Jesus gave them leave, and the unclean spirits went out and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. There were about 2,000 and were choked in the sea. There's so much we can talk about here, but notice Jesus would rather save a man than hundreds and hundreds of pigs. Even an outcast in society was more valuable than pigs, many pigs. The pigs were worth money too. But one thing Jesus shows us is we are more valuable than many pigs. It's important you live with this understanding. You are precious in God's eyes, very precious. The next example comes from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6. Jesus is preaching here in this section of the Sermon on the Mount and showing us why we should not worry. I want to highlight 2 verses here which are valuable to this topic. In verse 25, Jesus says, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for the body, what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body than raiment? Life being more than meat and clothes is itself a testament to the greatness of man over animals. Meat comes from killing something, and some clothes came from animals too. But I want to highlight the next verse in this passage. Verse 26 says, behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much better than they? Jesus gives the example of God caring for birds. If God takes care of them, how much more will he care for you? The implication here is clear. We are far greater in God's eyes than birds. Before I move to the third example, I want to mention a few chapters later where Jesus speaks about birds again. He says in Matthew 10 verse 31, you are more valuable than many sparrows. It's not only Genesis chapter 1 that shows the difference and the supremacy of man over animals. This is a theme throughout the Bible, and there is no sign in the Bible we evolved from animals. We are in a total different lane than animals. I've thought about how God made us in his image often over the last few years. Focusing on this helps you see your true value so much more than the world wants you to remember. This is how it's so easy for many today to end life or say life doesn't exist until a certain time, even though science proves the opposite. But in Matthew chapter 12, Jesus is speaking about animals again. Pigs were unclean. Some birds were unclean too, but sheep were clean animals in the Old Covenant. So it's not like we only see Jesus showing man is more valuable than a pig. This is why what Jesus says in Matthew 12 is so powerful. Jesus asks a powerful question in verse 11. What man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will not lay hold on it and lift it out? Then in verse 12 he says, how much more then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Jesus' logic here is clear. If you would help a sheep in need, you better help a human in need. How much better is a man than a sheep? I'm not saying people who believe they came from animals think they are less valuable than animals, or the same. There are some that see us all as animals, but my point today is to remind you, you are very valuable in God's sight. You are not an animal, your life is more valuable than many animals. And the more you think about that, the more effective you will be for God's kingdom. God bless.